What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the horror show. One of the last times you'll be seeing the celebratory lights because we're finally getting around to recording our top 10 horror movies of 2018. Honestly, we recorded it right up at the end of the year because we wanted as much time as possible to actually watch as many as we could.
There's so much to consider.
Indeed. I mean, ultimately, I watched, I think, over 75 movies. I didn't get the final count, but I know it's over 75.
I was
Where did you end up?
68, 60 something last time I checked because I got that little letterboxed little appy thing. So,
Yeah, I need to get that at some point. But this is going to be our top 10. We are going to do our own top 10, obviously. What I wanted to make clear at the beginning is that while there might have been some movies that I might consider more technically proficient, what some might consider better movies, but I ultimately decided the best ones when I was down to like 15 and I had to weed them out. I'm like, which ones am I going to rewatch more? And that's ultimately how I decided to, decided on my final 10. So
yeah, and for me, I was just basically like, this isn't the best horror. This is my favorite horror of the year, essentially. Right. So differences of opinion will abound, but I'm stoked to hear about his.
So let's get right into it, guys.
Woo!
Number 10. My number 10 is going to be Terrifier. This movie is, yes, it's not the deepest horror movie that's come out in a long time. It's not the best characters that have come out in a horror movie in a long time, but it did deliver one of the coolest new slashers that I've seen in horror in quite a while. I'm a big Scary Clown fan, and Art the Clown, portrayed by David Howard Thornton, he is one of the standouts in recent years, in my opinion. A silent killer clown that glees in some of the goriest kills that I've seen put to film. Unabashedly gory, no less, which we don't really see that much anymore. And so I kind of mentioned it because one of the moments was one of my top 5 scariest moments of this year as well.
Oof, I think I know.
But yeah, it is, in my opinion, one of the best at number 10 because it is an homage to old 80s slashers that didn't necessarily have major character depth, except this is a really twisted slasher who I really like. I mean, when he wears the crazy cat lady's chest, privates, and face, like, it's really disturbing, and I am going to revisit the movie based on, I'm a big gore fan, so I won't, I will watch it because I know those scenes are coming, and I don't mind how the movie played out, honestly. I don't hate it the way everyone else, or not everyone else, but the way some people seemed to.
Yeah.
So yeah, Terrifier was my number 10.
Yeah, I didn't love it, but I felt like they expanded on that character that we'd only seen in a single segment before, and with a new actor portraying Art, there was so much more glee, I thought, and I hate to say death, but yeah, it was a much more interesting slasher, and yeah, props for them having the balls to go for some of the things they did in that movie, man. So my number 10 is going to shock a lot of people because I just watched this the other day, and I could not believe just how happy it made me. And a horror film, especially a children's horror film, to make me as gleeful, to use that word once again, as this one did. I picked The House with the Clock in Its Walls. This is through and through a children's PG horror movie, but this is one that I honestly, from just the wonder and the newness of this child who, loses his parents and has to go live with his Uncle Jack Black, and, hanging out with the crazy neighbor Kate Blanchett next door. The chemistry between Kate and Jack is impeccable. Just their back and forth is hilarious. Directed by Eli Roth, who everybody, he's known for his gore and for his craziness, but I felt like he brought such a great visual style to it, whether it was the jack-o'-lanterns coming to life, and I mean, when they're mowing them all down, I'm like, this is like perfect, like not quite gore, but great for kids, and it's got some solid messages about friendship and respect of elders and all kinds of other stuff, and plus I liked the fact that despite being a PG horror film, especially once you understand the scope of what the villain is trying to do at the end, and some of the makeup work on this risen corpse, I mean, I could not believe how much fun I had with this movie. It genuinely made me feel like a kid again. And so for that reason, yeah, I had to put it somewhere on this list. And so it's not deep into the list, but I just, since I can't have any honorable mentions, yeah,
Nope.
I had to put this on there. So yeah, Eli Roth's The House with the Clock in Its Walls. I'm not sure how many people saw it, but I think it's a perfect introduction for youngsters into scary stuff. So.
I forgot that it was Eli Roth that did it, honestly. Like that, it makes sense, because I did enjoy it, not enough to put it on my top 10, but it was definitely miles above Goosebumps as far as kids' horror and stuff like that.
And beyond.
yeah, actually, yeah, cool monsters and things like that, so.
Yeah.
Although, too much lawn lion pooping jokes.
Yeah, and that was a running joke.
Yeah,
I was
too much.
just like, okay, yeah, this is definitely for kids, but...
So that's our number 10.
That is our number 10.
Number 9. So for my number 9, this is also one that, like your number 10, I just watched actually just a few days ago. And the only reason I watched it is because a friend of yours, now friend of the show's, Monty, who is the guy that runs the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival, part of the Phoenix Film Festival, he posted on his Facebook about this movie that was apparently the #1 grossing movie in Japan in 2018.
Yeah, a lot of festival buzz, too.
A lot of festival buzz, and it's called One Cut of the Dead. And so I saw him post about it literally the morning that we were supposed to record this, and I had enough time, I put it on, and quite honestly, the first 35 minutes, the credits roll after 35 minutes. And that's just sort of the beginning, and the first 35 minutes is all one shot. So it's got that going for it, but it's kind of a weird zombie movie, like a homemade zombie movie that you're seeing take place there. It's a crew filming a zombie movie when an actual zombie outbreak happens, but it's still not what you think. And then the back half of the movie is like it's separated into thirds, and essentially the last third is showing how the crew that is hired to make this zombie movie ends up making it look the way that it does. It's really complicated to kind of explain, but it ends up, it's a zombie comedy is really what it boils down to, because you see the crew rolling around behind the scenes to make it look like this movie is actually happening in one shot and things like that. And it's very humorous. It's funny because in the first part in the movie, there's a character that's playing a zombie that is like, against the window, and it turns out that particular actor is drunk and kind of passed out, and so the director is behind him holding him up against the window going, so it's like stuff like that, silly things like that.
Pulling the curtain back a little bit.
Exactly, and it ends up being so funny, and by the end, you're kind of like, you're ready to kind of stand up and clap for the crew and stuff like that. Being people that have made, short films and things like that, it's something we could really get a kick out of. I'm bummed because actually Fuego was going to try and watch it too, but literally one day after I got to see it on Amazon Prime. I think it was up there for 2 days, and Prime has taken it down because apparently it was a bootleg copy.
Monty was even posting about how much of a bummer that was just today.
Yeah, so I actually I got to see it in the 2 days that it was up, and then unfortunately Fuego didn't get to see it. So it's something that once it becomes available, you guys definitely need to seek out. Well worth your time. So that's my number 9.
Coolness. Well, my number 9 is the first in a few that show how much I like my sci-fi with some horror sprinkled in leanings, and my number 9 is Upgrade. This was a movie that, for me, felt so much like a throwback to the RoboCops and the Total Recalls, and I mean these not too distant future kind of and technology, running amok and going wrong and getting crazy. This movie has some amazing action sequences. It's violent, and it's got a hell of a portrayal from, I forget the name of the lead actor, but he had much more hair in The Invitation, but he was fantastic in that. And you sympathize so much with the plight of this guy whose wife is killed, he's paralyzed, and then they have this chip that is put into his body, and he's kind of having a war of words with this AI. This is honestly what I wanted Venom to be more like in a lot of ways, and the comparisons were most definitely made. This is the guy who he's worked on a lot of like straight up horror, but It was definitely his love letter to the violent 80s sci-fi horror films that I just absolutely adore. You know, stuff like Paul Verhoeven did, because I guess he did both RoboCop and Total Recall. I know you liked this movie, but didn't like love it, right? If I recall correctly.
No, I enjoyed it, but yeah, not enough to put it at the top of my list. I actually forgot about it. I'll probably grab it next Black Friday.
Yeah. Oh, it was damn good. This is totally one that I would rewatch. The twist at the end with the technology, you can kind of see it, and of course the villain, and you know, the mad scientist almost of sorts, is just a little bit one note, but I just loved his performance, and the violence of this movie really spoke to me. So yeah.
All right,
there you go.
Number 8. So my number 8 might be a bit of an odd choice for some of you guys, but I picked it for a couple of reasons. My choice is Primal Rage. And the reason I picked this one is because it is, in my estimation, what I feel is the best Bigfoot movie that we've gotten. It even though it's an independent movie, it was really cool. It had an interesting lore behind it. Lots of really great gore. And the creature itself was really awesome looking. Like, it was really well articulated in the face, and the sort of baboon creature that was actually, you know, had ties to Native American lore, and
which is one of the coolest parts, I thought.
Exactly, and it actually wields tools and weapons and things like that, but it's not afraid to step on someone's skull and smash it, you know what I mean? Like, I really just enjoyed the movie. The characters, again, weren't that deep, but that's not what I was there for.
No.
Outside of this one, Exists is the only one that kind of comes close. That one was pretty fun too, but this one doesn't shy away from showing the creature, and it's not CG. That's another thing that was really cool about it. So it's also, again, it's one that once I do add it to my collection, it's one I'm going to be probably going back to on a fairly regular basis, every couple of years at least. So yeah, that's why it warranted a spot on my list.
Nice. Well, I know how much of a creature guy you are, and there's been a ton of these Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever films lately. I thought it was pretty damn good. It didn't crack my list or anything, but yeah, the attention to the practical design of the creature, especially once you started to get better glimpses of it and stuff, it was impressive. You could tell that they actually spent the time and the money on that. Maybe not so much on some of the acting, but that's not the point really of this film. It's a cool creature design. This film definitely had it in spades. So, hell yeah. So jumping to my number 8, this is one that it's shown up on a lot of best of lists, and I'm seeing it closer to the top. This is, you know, bottom half of mine, but I picked the remake of Suspiria, and done by the director of Call Me By Your Name, a French director if I'm not mistaken, which really surprised a lot of people to have this love story, and then he goes into this bonkers remake that I thought had performances top to bottom that were very, very interesting. Dakota Johnson?
Dakota Johnson.
That's Dakota Johnson. Dakota Johnson. Everybody, I feel like, gave her a bad rap after those 50 Shades films, because she was also really good this year in Bad Times at the El Royale, which impressed the hell out of me as well. So she's very good in this film, and seeing her character arc and almost like embracing the temptation aspect and evil and everything. This still has one of the most shocking scenes that I watched in the entire like spectrum of craziness, this contorting body. I loved how like there was much more of an emphasis on dance in this in comparison with the original one, and just the correspondence of bones breaking with dancing and stuff like that. And it is a little long. It's long in the tooth. It's slow. It's plotting. There's also a kind of Holocaust B story that doesn't really work very well, but for me the A story works so good. It's so beautifully shot. The score by Tom York is fantastic. It's haunting, and at the end, this film goes for it. At the end, it is bat shizzle, crazy bonkers, and the colors and all of this other stuff, and it really just, in my estimation, set itself apart very much so from the original. It just kind of loosely took a few themes and then reinterpreted so much very beautifully, and it was a haunting film in my estimation. It really, really, truly was, and it spoke to me. So there you go.
Fair enough. Yeah, I thought about it for my list, but the B story is what prevented it from being in my top 10. I just was so bored by the B story, and Not all that impressed by the makeup effects, and
That was one thing I didn't like much about.
and so I couldn't put it on the list, but I do respect the ending, and I do respect that one contortion death scene.
Whew, yeah.
But yeah, so good one.
There you go. Yeah.
Number 7. So number 7 is where we finally reach one of my only 3 big budget theatrical releases that are on my list.
You went indie, dude.
I did go largely indie on this, but with good reason, and that's partly because I watched over 75 horror movies this year. I didn't watch nearly as many last year, but I'm genuinely glad I did, because look at how prevalent some of these are on my list, and I haven't even gotten to some of the real interesting ones yet that you didn't even know about until I told you about and stuff like that, or you probably heard about it, but you know what I mean.
We have such a lengthy, constantly growing list of films to check out.
They come and go so fast.
It's nuts.
It's tough to keep track of it all, but I am going to go and it's not going to be in my top 5, but I'm going to place Halloween 2018 here. The reason I'm putting it on my list is for there's a couple reasons. Yes, I did not like the Dr. Sartain twist. That was awful. But I liked most everything else, and the other thing I didn't like was the very end. I didn't like how they resolved everything. That was lame. But what I liked about it, and why it's still cracked my list, is because of what it represents in what is going to be coming now in horror, that I didn't think we'd necessarily get. Right, this movie lit such a fire under the fan base, and such a fire now under the studio base, that there's no way we're not going to get a resurgence of Freddy or Jason, and we're already getting Chucky coming back. They'll want to get back to doing Leatherface right. Like, all of this is going to come because of Halloween 2018. And yes, Michael Myers was the best since Nick Castle, so I do have to give it credit for that, bringing back a true, old school slasher in such a great fashion after having had so many lackluster attempts in many recent years. So that's why I'm doing it. I thought Laurie's portrayal in H2O was better than her portrayal in this one.
Totally agree.
But, it was still nice that she came back. I like Will Patton, and so there was enough there, and it's really more of what it represents is why it cracked my list, more so than the movie it actually is. But again, being the big slasher fan that I am, I also know that I will be rewatching it likely more than some of the other ones. If I put Suspiria on my list, I'd be rewatching Halloween more than that, because that's a long movie to commit to that I won't do. So there you go. That's the long and short of why, more the long of why I like put Halloween 2018 at this spot.
Yeah, I definitely didn't love Halloween 2018. It felt like a greatest hits record to me in a lot of ways. But I mean, the new score that Carpenter did wowed me. I thought it was fantastic, and the fact that he can still just produce a cool new spin, but yet still have that familiarity about it. But then again, that's really what this movie was totally all about, is just having those familiar beats and those things, and just feeling like a, I don't know, a well-worn pair of jeans or jacket or shoes or something you can just slide right into, and you're comfortable, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it's going to mean a lot to just horror in the near future, especially with all the big slashers and whatnot. But okay, so my number 7, not a horror movie, but I justified putting it on this list because of the fact that it was covered by every horror outlet. It's a thriller through and through, but it was such a visual masterpiece. I'm talking about Searching with John Cho, one of the best performances I saw this year for a brand new filmmaker to piece together something in this fashion using nothing but, cameras on phones and on computers. And I mean, this guy worked for Google, apparently, as I was finding out in the behind the scenes, for a number of years. And so he had that just technological vision, because when everybody was filming this movie with him, they were just like, okay, I almost feel like I'm making like an Avatar or something, because like, what's the finished product actually going to look like? But, it could have been a visual feast, and, just very tech and slick and everything, but it was the humanity of the performances and just some of the beats where you're thinking the most horrible possibilities of things that could have happened to this guy's daughter. It's a film that honestly made me feel anxious and on edge throughout the entirety of the time that I was watching it. And I can honestly attest that a lot of horror films, like straight up horror films that I watched this year, did not accomplish the dread and the fear that I felt related by Cho's character in the scenario that this film pieced together. So Searching is a beautiful looking film, and it is a technical masterpiece, and it set the benchmark so much higher than the Unfriendeds and other films that have tried a similar approach. Man, so the bar has been raised big time, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I didn't feel it was strong enough. Again, I'm not going to rewatch it as much as I'm going to rewatch these other ones, but I do think it was very strong. A very up-like first 5 minutes, surprisingly. That again, it raised the bar for that sort of filmmaking. The found footage-esque presented through a laptop sort of filmmaking, it definitely did raise that bar, especially in that first 5 minutes where I'm like, wow, I'm so engaged just based on the footage they're showing me that, that's accomplished filmmaking. So I definitely can see why you put it there, though.
Yeah, I love this film. So, yeah, that's my Saito.
Number 6.
So my number 6 is going to be one that I, again, watched when I was trying to catch up on movies for this particular video. And that is one called Aterrados, otherwise known as Terrified. It is available on Shudder. It is originally a Argentinian horror movie, I believe, or at least it takes place in Argentina. So they're speaking Spanish, through pretty much the whole thing. But it's so well done as far as scares go. It's like, to me, I felt watching this the same way I felt when I was young enough to watch the original Ring and The Grudge. Those sorts of jumps and scares that weren't old hat at the time, I had that same sort of feeling here. There's some genuine scares and some things that I can tell that other movies are going to be taking in the future. And in fact, isn't someone in talks to remake it right now?
Guillermo is producing a remake of this movie right now.
Guillermo del Toro. So there you go. There's a reason that he took notice of this movie. I mean, the poster that I'm showing you see one of the things with like a split face. That's just like one of the weird images that really catches you off guard. There's a scene in the first 5 minutes of this movie that I was like, I'm ready, because I'll be honest, Jason Smith from Sinister Cinema Reviews said that I needed to make sure to watch this one because he thought it was one of the scariest ones of the year, and I was like, wow, okay, so let me sit down and finally watch it.
Big
and
endorsement.
I sat down to do it, and in that first 5 minutes, when I got to that first scary scene that he thought also was one of the scariest, I was like, wow, this is really unnerving, I'm in for something here. And then it kept ratcheting it up and just doing crazier and cooler, different stuff. And the imagery is really unnerving. And there's one moment, too, when a character is about to drive away, but they're assaulted by something. And when you realize what it is, it's like Linda Blair walking backwards down the stairs, upside down levels of unnerving.
Damn.
It's so good, you guys. Ultimately, the story was a little confusing for me. I would want to rewatch it in order to make sure I understood it all, but again, I'm trying to filter it through the language barrier. I was watching it with subtitles, but I'm also transfixed by what's going on, so I have a feeling I might have missed a line or two. So it's definitely absolutely worth your time. Again, it's available on Shudder right now. So if you have that, go and check it out, or if not, get the free trial and check it out, because this movie is worth the Shudder trial alone. So
yeah, this is one that I sadly did not get to. It was lost in the lengthy shuffle. I mean, there's still about a dozen movies I didn't get the chance to watch that I wanted to take into consideration. But I mean, if they already have Guillermo producing a remake, everything Shudder assembles, in my estimation, for $5 a month especially, is pretty top notch, and there's so much deep diving coolness you can do. So I am definitely with you and Jason's endorsement at this point. I gotta check this film out. So my number 6 is a film I was originally thinking was going to go a lot higher, and I know it's on your list. Hereditary. So Hereditary at number 6. It kind of slid as the year went on for me. What's the name of the actress? Annie Collette?
Toni Collette.
Toni Collette. Yeah. Her performance is insane. It is dramatic. It is, I mean, the anguish that you feel for not just her but the family. Wolf, something Wolf. He was in like the Naked Trucker Band, whatever, like Nickelodeon show or something like that. He showed some legitimate range as well. I thought Gabriel Byrne. This is more so a performance slow burn for me. But, I mean, visually terrific. It still has one of the most shocking scenes that, along with the one from Suspiria that I mentioned earlier in the countdown, is on my list as one of the biggest shockers, where I was just sitting in the theater and everybody was just like, what the fudge just happened, man? It was one of those moments. But, I mean, you just can tell from the very beginning that this is going to be something visually stunning with just, the whole dollhouse aspect, which is, Colette's character's, job and whatnot. So I won't gush on and on about this because I know you're going to be discussing it as well. So yeah, it's at my number 6 because at the end of the day, I just enjoyed sensibility-wise some things about these films that I put ahead of it more so.
Number 5.
So for number 5, I am going to go with another movie that I watched for this within the last month. I must have watched probably 25 movies in the last month alone, just trying to catch up. But this one is one that really, really surprised me, and I told Fuego about it. I told everyone around the show about it because it's just something that was done so well and so different, or at least it uses horror tropes in completely different ways than you're used to. So I really appreciated that, and that's Incident in a Ghostland. This movie changes throughout, from one kind of movie to another kind of movie to another kind of movie. And I don't want to say exactly why or how, but essentially the most basic setup is there is a family driving and they're on some kind of road trip, and the little girls are in the back, and they're, like early teens, and there's a weird vehicle that pulls up next to them and like waves. And, they just are really creepily waving and waving and waving until the family, like, waves back. And then, like, they back up to the back seat and wave at the kids. And then one girl waves and the other one flips them off. And from that point forward, things go off the rails because turns out they're not the nicest people. And there is repercussions to being rude to people sometimes. Now, from there, that's basically the first act setup. From there, the movie again changes, and then you get sort of what you think is going to be the full movie, and you're like, oh, okay, so it's going to be this kind of thing. And then they do something else, and you're like, whoa, what? Mm-hmm. And you're like, wait, so, and I'm not going to ruin what happens, but just suffice it to say that you're better off going into it knowing as little about it as possible. And that the acting is super strong. The only one that I know for sure is the actress that played the main guy's girlfriend in the Teen Wolf TV series, Allison. She played Allison for the first 3 or 4 seasons of that show. She is in this, and she does a fantastic job, but so do all of the actors and actresses. And the creepy people do well, the kids do well, she does well. Everyone is really on point in this, and since the plot kept me guessing, or at least kept throwing me off, it was really a joy to just let unfold. You know what I mean? So that's going to be mine for sure. Incident in a Ghostland earned that top 5 spot.
This so barely did not make the list for me, and I think it was really ultimately because of the fact that the one-noteness of the villains and stuff like that, without really spoiling too much, the creepy, people following you, whatever. This is one where I don't want to divulge anything, but I love the performances of the two sisters in this especially. I thought they were absolutely terrific. The set design in this movie, despite the fact that it's primarily contained in a single spot, was just beautifully put together. This old house that the family is moving to and stuff. And boy, I love the sensibilities of the character and her aspirations to be a writer and her obsession with H.P. Lovecraft and everything. This was a great movie. This was one that, as I said, just barely did not make the list for me. So, yeah, it's awesome. All right. So, my number 5 is going to be one that I really wish you could have seen, because I think it might have garnered some consideration from you. It's a small Canadian horror film called The Heretics. This is one that I saw at the International Horror Sci-Fi Film Festival this past year, and it's essentially about this girl who is kidnapped by a cult, and this crazy ritual goes down, and then she's able to escape, and she's years down the line still dealing with all the PTSD aspects of it, and she has this girlfriend that is kind of her support system and helping her through the process of just grieving and getting past everything, and then she is taken back into captivity for just kind of the fulfillment of the rest of the ritual. The practical and you see in the trailer of this film that there is some sort of transformative process that's going down with the actress. I don't really want to spoil too much more, but just the makeup, the almost like borderline creature and appendage work and stuff that they do, and the main performances between this actress and the would-be captor, that brings her back to the same area where she was taken when she was a kid, is just really crazy to me. And when the twist of what's actually going down really starts to reveal itself, you're just like, damn, interesting, okay. And it's slimy and brutal, and it is some of the coolest transformation stuff that I've seen in quite a while. And it's a small contained film. I think there's a very small cast. There's really just 3 main characters essentially, and then a couple others. But yeah, the remote Canadian location where they filmed it at, it all looked beautiful. So yeah, this is one that I would definitely recommend. It's a small little indie horror film, but much like Incident in a Ghost Lane, which you were just talking about, this is just a small little gem that I think definitely went under a lot of people's radars and stuff, and just wasn't as widely seen as I felt it should have been. So the Heretics is right there at my number 5. Cool.
Number 4.
So my number 4 is also a movie that I placed one of the moments as one of the top 5 scariest moments of the year, and that is The Ritual. I had to put this on my list. Again, I know it came out in the UK last year, but it didn't drop in the US until this year. So I'm including it on my list for this year. The Ritual is by far one of the best creature horror movies that have come out in the last 5 years, probably the last 10 years. The story is, while not something necessarily new, it is very engaging with the characters that we see. I mean, it starts off with a group of friends hanging out, trying to decide what to do, and 2 of them go into a little market, and it gets robbed, and one of the guys ends up getting killed in the robbery, and the other guy just sort of does nothing. And so there's this built-in tension when the group decides to go on this trip to honor their dead friend. There's this inherent tension. Some of them don't think that the friend did enough to try and stop and save their other friend. And so there's this really interesting dynamic with the group going into the movie where they're going to run into trouble. That always, to me, makes for some of the best horror movies, when you have that really interesting group dynamic going into it. You're really bought in on the characters. It's a big help. And then you add to the fact that they run afoul of this, first they think possibly weird cult, but they see bodies hung up in the trees and splayed open, not animal carcasses, and eventually human carcasses. And so they know something unnatural is there. They run afoul of this tribe that worships the creature, and it whittles down the group, unfortunately, and you're left with just a couple of survivors that have to try and get away and escape this massive thing that is truly one of the most unique creature designs in the last decade.
Easily.
I mean, it really is, and it's accomplished so tremendously in the effects department that I can't gush enough about this movie as a giant creature fan. The fact that I got something wholly unique and new in the creature design department just made my heart soar. Like, oh, there can be something new under the sun as far as this kind of thing goes. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'll stop gushing, or else I won't stop gushing.
Yeah. The Ritual's creature is definitely worth the price of admission. The rest of it I wasn't quite as hot on and stuff, and there's Blair Witch leanings and things like that. But yes, if you stick around till the back half of the movie for this creature, because it's It's incredible looking. So my number 4 is going to be similar to Upgrade in the fact that it's probably more of a science fiction film than a full-on horror film, and that's Annihilation, the second film by Alex Garland. I love this movie, and it's honestly, I'm compelled to read the rest of the Southern Reach trilogy because I was just, this adapted only the first book, but I guess there's no plans to make 2 and 3, at least not as of yet. The film was not like a big financial success. I believe it was released streaming in the rest of the world, and in North America was the only place where it actually ended up getting a theatrical release, which I think is a travesty because of the fact that like when they go inside this bubble of sorts, this weird constantly changing ecosystem and stuff, it needed to be seen on a big huge screen. And there's like some of the horrific scenes especially where we see this body that has just transformed and it's like pasted on the wall, and just what happened to this corpse and stuff over time. It's disgusting and yet beautiful almost at the same time. Tessa Thompson is great in it. Natalie Portman is great in it. The cast, an all-female cast essentially, with the exception of some flashback stuff with Oscar Wilde, or Oscar Isaac, I should say. Yeah, damn good, man. And there is, maybe for my money, the coolest like creepy creature that I saw on screen this year in this crazy like the hybrid bear like I don't know. And it is one of the tensest scenes where you finally see what is going on with this character without spoiling anything. Yeah, I loved Annihilation. I didn't love it as much as Ex Machina, but it still showed that, you know, Garland has a very beautiful and distinctive visual style, at least in my opinion. So yeah, there you go, Annihilation.
Yeah, I didn't like it enough to put it on my list, but I did obviously like the bear scene enough to put it on my scariest scenes or scariest moments list. So yeah, it definitely deserves that.
Yep. So that's my number 5.
Number 3.
So for my number 3, I'm going to go with one that is, it's funny that I actually am choosing this, or at least some people will find it funny, because this movie was actually sitting on a shelf for about 2 years before it finally got its release. It's made by a director that everyone respects, especially after this year in particular. It's made by a man named Mike Flanagan, who is also the driving creative force and director of all the episodes of The Haunting of Hill House. But Mike Flanagan also made this movie back in 2016 called Before I Wake. And it didn't actually see its release on Netflix until this year. January 5th, I believe, is when it technically drops. So it barely contends, but I'm counting it because it's one of my favorite things that Flanagan has done. It's a really creepy, haunted, not haunted house story, but haunted child story, but also child with powers kind of story, and also grieving parents, but a specific grieving mother that becomes addicted to trying to see her dead child through this new child and his powers. But, you know, they don't understand the powers, and so it becomes uncontrollable, and it starts to morph into this thing that has been a thing plaguing this kid ever since a particular incident in his life happened. There's this shadow creature that he calls the Canker Man coming after him, and stuff goes down and stuff gets serious and it gets dark and there's real life and death stakes, but it still has the punch at the end, or at least it had the punch at the end where you find out sort of the origins of the Canker Man and all of that, and it's just like, wow, it really just hit me in the right spot. And, you know, and then it ultimately sort of plays out as a sort of origin story to this kid with powers. And I really enjoyed the movie for a bunch of different levels. But, I mean, all in all, Before I Wake absolutely earned the number 3 spot on my list this year.
Yeah, Flanagan's a hell of a filmmaker. I know Netflix decided to release this after the success of Gerald's Game, and that was even before, like, the superstar that he's essentially become with the Haunting of Hill House now. Second great performance from that actress I saw this year, because she was also in The Domestics, which I really enjoyed. Thomas Jane, Even the kid, Jacob Tremblay, he's great in this. So I didn't absolutely adore it, but I respected the heck out of what they were trying to do, and boy, does it pack an emotional punch, man.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously does. So my number 3 is going to be one that it is the follow-up to one of my favorite films of the last few years. Number 3, I'm throwing out Summer of '84. It's a lot of people compared it to Stranger Things, rightfully so, kind of riding on that whole, okay, the 80s and, things set then, and the synthy soundtracks and everything are just so in right now. But RKSS had an amazing job casting with this. I thought all of the kids were unique, their dynamic and chemistry was great, and this is a film that the ending was definitely like nothing I had seen before with regards to, confirmation of who this killer actually is, and then also what happens with the main kid and the ending exchange that happens, in the last few minutes of this film is crazy. It's got a tremendous soundtrack once again from the same guys, Le Matos, that did the score for Turbo Kid as well. Le Matos, RKSS. I don't know. This is another one that made me feel like a kid in just the camaraderie, and also it's got some Rear Window leanings obviously and whatnot. Is the person next door actually a serial killer? But I don't know, I identified so much with this main kid, and that is something that's helpful for me with just relating to a film, and in turn loving a film as much as I loved Summer of '84. One of the few that I saw twice in a theater this year because I enjoyed it enough. I went and saw it a second time with Lou after we saw it at International Horror Sci-Fi Film Festival, which was where one of the many festivals where it made the round. So I know you like this movie, but didn't quite love it as much as me, obviously, if it didn't show up on the list. Or...
Yeah, not quite as much as you. Definitely worth your time to see, but yeah, I just... Again, it comes down to certain rewatchability, and I'm just going to watch all these more so.
Yeah, totally. I feel you, man. So yeah, my number 3, Summer of '84.
Yeah, the other thing about Summer of '84 is, while it led the way this year, another movie came out very similar to it, Clove Hitch Killer, that basically does the same plot, essentially, but just changes the last third. So it plays out a little bit differently than Summer of '84, but both really strong. Both, unfortunately, not the kind of movies that I will put at the top, but Summer of '84, I did really love the fact that the end was so unique in and amongst that style of horror movie.
Yeah, Clove Hitch is one I definitely want to check out, too.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Number 2.
So for my number 2, yes, Fuego did mention that I would be talking about this, and how could I not? This movie was one of the most effective horror movies that I've seen in recent history. It's going to definitely stick in my mind for a very long time. I haven't even rewatched it yet. I watched it in the theater. I bought the Blu-ray, Marsha borrowed it, and I haven't gotten it back from her yet. So I haven't been able to rewatch it, but Hereditary. I absolutely loved Hereditary as a movie-going experience earlier this year. It's one of the only times I can remember going to a movie theater and having such a visceral group audience reaction to a particular moment, where literally the whole theater went like an audible reactions, whether it be breathing or moans or freakouts or screams, whatever it was, everyone uttered something. And that in and of itself is worth mentioning as a horror fan, but the fact that situation, that moment was only followed up by some even creepier stuff that the brother does, just going home and laying in bed and then leaving things to be discovered. And again, this moment was my number 1 scariest moments of 2018. So you know how much I do adore this movie. The rest of the movie then plays out in sort of, I would say, a more typical recent horror movie, but even that subverts expectations to me and goes ways that I wasn't seeing it going. I mean, there's a particular death towards the end that is super gruesome and like, what? And then the imagery after that is just crazy, and I've been wanting to rewatch it, so I need to absolutely do it once I get my copy back, but this movie is going to stick with me for a very long time, and so I had to put it high on my list.
Yeah, it's a damn good film, as I said earlier, man. Hereditary. And can't wait to see what that director does next. My number 2, one of the most divisive films of the year.
Uh-oh.
And I thought about making it my number one, but I don't know. There's something very, very silly about Nick Cage's performance in this. So I'm talking Mandy. This is a visual treat, but I can see why some people, Marshall Parker, hated this movie. It's dreamy. It makes you feel like you're on drugs at times, especially. But I mean, it's from the lighting to just the weird design of this crazy biker gang that almost feel like they're straight out of like Cenobite land or something, and then just the cult in this movie that kidnaps Cage's girlfriend, and then what ultimately happens and stuff with that is just, it genuinely creeped me out. These people creeped me out. They felt like Jonestown cult craziness to me. That was unnerving. And then, who doesn't love a good, fist-pumping revenge flick? And when Nick Cage really, when he goes and meets up with the guy who is from the first Predator movie, anytime, the black dude who's like giving him the different weapons and stuff like that. I don't know. It's definitely a film that some may perceive as disjointed in the fact that every 20 to 30 minutes or so, visually, sonically, it just kind of, I don't know. It's a very, very frenetic film, but yet almost schizophrenic film also. But man, the scene where they put the drug drops in her eyes and then break out this huge wasp that they have in a jar, but it's still alive, and they sting her in the neck, and so she's got the poison and the drug stuff going through, and then this cult leader goes and, I don't know. This movie is so strange. And for that reason, I loved it, but boy, it's not for everybody. Your thoughts on Mandy?
I liked Mandy a lot, actually. Yeah. I couldn't justify putting it on my list because the first hour is so slow. I did, and it is a bit muddled, but I do enjoy it, and I do think it's visually different than a lot of things we've seen in a long time. Very red and purple heavy, of course.
Yeah, big time.
But still, it was intriguing to watch. I don't know that it's one I'll rewatch very many times. Again, a big factor for me this year. But I do think it's definitely worth mentioning. I'm glad one of us had it on our list.
Yeah.
I knew I wouldn't. But.
Yeah, I just watched this the other day, so maybe with further consideration, it would have slid a little further down, but I was just wowed, and boy, it made me feel like I was on drugs about halfway through. Weird.
Number one.
So finally, for our number one, I believe we have the same one for number one.
Yeah.
So we might as well just talk about it together.
Double down.
Yeah, this movie is one that really surprised me how good it ended up being. When we saw the first trailer for it, we were all hyped about it, and I was like, what a brilliant idea, and I just hope they deliver. And of course, I feel like they did. This is A Quiet Place.
Damn right.
I absolutely loved this movie. Again, I'm a Creature fan, so I think there's at least 3 Creature movies on my list this year. And, with good reason, this one took the top spot. It's scary, it's emotional, and it's the epitome of what movies should strive to do, which is show, don't tell. They literally couldn't tell a lot of the information in this in stupid expository ways like other movies do. They had to rely on the fantastic acting of Krasinski and Blunt and their kids in order to get across just how insane this situation is, and for us to buy into it, which we absolutely did. Take that away from the fact that it has some of the creepiest creatures that, yes, were a bit of a combination between the Cloverfield monster and the Resident Evil monster and the Demogorgon. But, it still was so beautifully rendered and scary and something I didn't want to meet in any sort of alley, let alone dark or light. So I can't talk enough about this movie. I'll save some room for Fuego to talk, but yeah, absolutely this one earned my top spot.
Yeah, holy hell was this movie good. The top to bottom performance-wise, especially the girl who is actually deaf in real life, who plays the daughter. She was terrific. The labor scene with Emily Blunt, I'm not a woman, so I have no idea about this, but just the very idea of her trying to keep quiet in the midst of going into labor with, you know, the threat of a creature right there that if she makes a sound will come and kill her and her child. One of the most unnerving things I have seen, maybe ever, put to screen. I will boldly say that. Krasinski, as a director, he just impressed me thoroughly, and obviously performance-wise too. Like, I mean, the slow dance scene with the two of them with music. I mean, there's so many just sweet scenes in this too, and terrifying scenes. And the fact that it was basically a silent film at the end of the day, in more ways than one. And the fact that, I mean, it takes so much more talent to be able to get those points across, like you said, without just explaining everything and like leading the audience around and making sure that they figure everything out. And the end to this, I can't remember the last time I was like fist pumping at the end of a movie. I was like, yeah! And that's what this movie did for me. It really truly is a crowd pleaser. I'll use that cliched term, but damn, it's the perfect PG-13 horror movie in my opinion, in the fact that I mean, it'll obviously scare really, really young kids, but it appeals to adults, it appeals to, you know, younger horror fans, it appeals to creature fans, it appeals to this is one that I recommended to my parents. I don't think they ever got around to watching it because they were too worried it was going to scare them or something, but it's got such great dramatic beats in it. I mean, it's an exceptional film, and probably of all the films that I watched, the one that, you know, touched me the most. So there you go.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. That's going to do it for our top 10 horror movies of 2018. Why don't you guys let us know in the comments down below if you have different choices. Maybe we'll do a special alternates podcast or something so Fuego can scratch his itch.
I've got some honorables.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about them right now. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. Again, let us know your choices down below if they were any different. Let us know if we turned you on to any that you hadn't even heard of yet. I'd be curious to know if us bringing up some of these are going to move the needle as far as some people experiencing some horror that they otherwise wouldn't have. I'm excited to learn about that. So while you guys are down there commenting, go ahead and like the video if you did enjoy what you saw, and subscribe if you haven't yet. We're going to be doing more lists going forward, a bit less episodes that you will be down to one a day starting probably in February. But the extra episodes will be available on Patreon. So click that link while you're down there as well. Just $1 will get you access to see those episodes going forward. So thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias for an awesome 2018. I've been Jaime and Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.